The mountains of the Vale were sharp and cold, but the eyrie stood proud like a sword pointed at the sky. Inside those high white halls, 3 young boys walked the same stone floors, trained with the same swords, and were taught by the same lord, Jon Arryn Eddard Stark. Quiet and thoughtful, was always the first to rise in the mornings. His northern blood loved the cold, and he found comfort in silence. Robert Baratheon, loud and full of life, would storm into the yard each morning with a wide grin, challenging every knight to a spar. And then there was Rhaegar Targaryen, the silver-haired prince with eyes like purple flames. He was the quietest of them all, but not because he was shy. No, Rhaegar listened more than he spoke. He watched, learned, and carried a sadness even as a boy. They were different in every way. But in the Vale, they became brothers. Jon Arryn had agreed to take them all in after King Aerys's strange request. The Mad King had grown more paranoid with each passing year, and for reasons unknown, he wanted his heir away from court. He said it was for discipline and honor, but others whispered that he feared his own son's growing power. So Rhaegar was sent to the Vale. Robert came later after the death of his parents. Storm's End was no place for a child, and Jon Arryn was close to his father. So Robert came too. Ned came last, sent by his father, Lord Rickard Stark, to grow under Lord Arryn's care. And from that day on, the 3 boys grew together, an unlikely trio, but a strong one. Ned admired Rhaegar deeply. He saw a prince who didn't act like one, no pride, no cruelty, no arrogance. Rhaegar read books instead of showing off with swords, and he sang songs when he thought no one was listening. He spoke of old Valyria, of the doom, of prophecy and dreams. Rhaegar was not like his father, and Ned knew that. Deep down, he believed Rhaegar would make a better king than any Targaryen before him. Robert, on the other hand, hated Rhaegar at first. Not because of who he was, but because of what he represented. Dragons, fire, madness, power. Robert mocked him, tried to fight him, tried to break him. But Rhaegar never fought back in anger. He only smiled or sometimes walked away. That made Robert even angrier. Until one day they fought for real. It wasn't a spar. It was fists and fury. Robert had shouted something cruel about the Targaryens, and Rhaegar had stood up for his dead mother. The fight was brutal, and both boys ended up bruised and bloodied. Lord Arryn found them in the yard, covered in dirt, with Ned trying to pull them apart. That night, Jon Arryn didn't punish them. He simply sat them down and told them a story about the wars he'd seen, about the brothers who had killed each other, and about how peace was made not by kings, but by friends. From that night, something shifted. Robert started calling Rhaegar Silverhair with a grin instead of a sneer. And Rhaegar began helping Robert with his reading, even though Robert hated books. Ned, quiet as always, was the bridge between them. As they grew older, they trained harder. Robert became the strongest, smashing through dummies and shields like a storm. Ned became the most loyal and disciplined, always following orders. And Rhaegar became something else. He was graceful, deadly, and smart. He played the harp at night, and even the hard-faced knights would stop to listen. But deep inside, Rhaegar had questions. About his father, about the crown, about the prophecy he had read in the old scrolls. He had dreams of a great darkness coming, and in those dreams, he stood in fire, alone. Yet when the 3 of them stood together on the edge of the eyrie, wind blowing their cloaks, they felt invincible. They swore an oath, not of loyalty to a house, but to each other. If one of them ever needed help, the others would come. No matter the cost, they believed they could shape the world together, but the world had other plans. The days in the Vale grew longer, and the boys became young men. The cold wind no longer stung their skin, it made them sharper. Their bond had only grown stronger with time, but the outside world had started to reach its fingers into their peaceful life. Rhaegar turned 17. He moved like a man now, graceful and calm, every word chosen like a blade. He had grown taller than Ned, almost as tall as Robert, but he didn't care for size or strength. His mind was somewhere else, somewhere far ahead. He had started reading about the prince that was promised, about Azor Ahai reborn, about the long night. Rhaegar believed in prophecies. Too much, perhaps. Robert still thought it was foolish. You think the stars are going to tell you who to marry? He laughed one evening, drunk on strong Vale wine. I say marry a girl with hips, not a damn riddle, Ned chuckled. But Rhaegar didn't laugh. He stared into the fire, silent. That night, he dreamt again of a baby being born beneath a bleeding star. Back in the training yard, Robert smashed through another knight's shield with a warhammer, his laughter echoing off the walls. He was already a giant in the eyes of the men, and even Ser Vardis said Robert would be the finest warrior in Westeros one day. But Robert had started drinking more. He liked the cheers, the women, the praise. It filled something in him, something he didn't want to admit he was missing, and Ned, steady, quiet Ned, watched both of his brothers go in different directions. He loved them both, but he began to fear what they would become. Then the letters began to arrive from King's Landing. Lord Arryn didn't share them at first, but Rhaegar noticed. He could feel it. Something was changing. His father, the Mad King, was summoning him back. Not with force, but with cold words. Your duty is to your crown, not to bastards and stormborn boys. Rhaegar didn't speak of it, but Ned knew. He saw the sadness behind the prince's calm face. One night, Rhaegar took Ned and Robert up to the highest tower of the Eyrie. Wind screamed around them like ghosts. I'm going to be called back soon, Rhaegar said, looking at the stars. Father is planning something. I don't know what yet, but it stinks of madness. Robert stepped forward. You think he's going to name you Hand? Or put you on a leash? No, Rhaegar said softly. I think he wants to keep me close because he's afraid of me. Robert spat over the ledge. Afraid? Of his own son? Yes. Rhaegar turned, his eyes glowing in the moonlight. Because I'm not like him, and he knows I'll never become him. Ned's voice was low. Then stay. Don't go back. But Rhaegar only smiled. If I don't go back, he'll send someone worse. Someone he can control. Then the realm will burn faster. Ned felt it then, like a crack in the ice beneath their feet. Their time as boys was ending. 3 moons later, Rhaegar left. Robert tried to hide it, but he was furious. He broke 3 shields in practice the next day, cursing Rhaegar under his breath. Ned watched silently, knowing Robert wasn't angry at Rhaegar. He was afraid of losing him, because without Rhaegar things didn't feel whole. Then came more letters. Lady Stark had written to Ned. Lord Rickard wanted him home. War was stirring in the south. Whispers of dawn rising again. Rumors of the Mad King torturing his own council. And there was talk of a tournament to be held soon at Harrenhal, the great tourney. Robert's eyes lit up when he heard it. We'll ride there, he said. All of us. Even Rhaegar. We'll meet again on the field. Ned nodded slowly. If he's still free to choose where to ride. They didn't know it then, but the tourney at Harrenhal would become the turning point of history. The place where honor would be tested, where love would be mistaken for treason, where one prince would crown a northern girl the queen of love and beauty, and in doing so, doom the realm. But for now, they were still just boys with dreams. That night, Robert climbed the tower again, alone this time. He looked up at the stars and muttered, Don't change, Silverhair. Don't let that place eat you. Far away in the Red Keep, Rhaegar stared at the Iron Throne, cold, sharp, and empty. He felt the weight of it already, pressing on his chest like armor he didn't ask to wear. The gods must have been watching when the banners went up at Harrenhal. Every great house came. The Starks from the north, the Baratheons from Storm's End, the Martells, the Tyrells, even the grey ships of the Ironborn. But the crown jewel among them was Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne. He arrived not as a boy from the Vale, but as a prince, cloaked in black and red, riding a white stallion. His silver hair flowed behind him, and his violet eyes scanned the crowd like they were all ghosts. Ned Stark hadn't seen Rhaegar in over a year. When they locked eyes in the crowd, there was a moment, a silent nod, and the ghost of a smile. But the warmth they'd shared as boys was harder to find now. The distance between them had grown. even if they still stood on the same ground. Robert, on the other hand, didn't hide his feelings. He rushed to Rhaegar's tent that night, shoved past 2 gold cloaks, and wrapped the prince in a bear hug. "You look like a bloody statue," he laughed. "When did you become so pretty?" Rhaegar smiled and said, "When you left me alone in King's Landing with madmen and liars." They drank together that night, under the stars, with Ned joining later. The Vale boys were together again, just for a little while, but Harrenhal was cursed. Everyone knew it, built too big, with walls blackened by dragonfire. And in that ancient ruin, fate had set its pieces on the board. Lyanna Stark had come with her father and brothers, wild and fierce, with a laugh like wind through the trees. She didn't care for dresses or balls. She rode like a knight and spoke like a storm. When Rhaegar first saw her, it wasn't in the hall. It was in the forest. She was chasing her wolf through the trees, barefoot, her hair wild. Rhaegar was riding back from the lake, harp slung over his back. They almost crashed into each other. He apologized. She laughed, and then she said, "You're the prince, aren't you? I thought you'd be taller." Rhaegar chuckled for the first time in weeks. That meeting meant nothing at the time. Or so it seemed, but that night he played a song in the hall, soft, haunting, full of sorrow. And as his fingers moved, his eyes weren't on the crowd. They were on the wolf girl from the woods. Robert saw it. So did Ned. "She's betrothed to me," Robert said later, his voice tight. "She just doesn't know it yet." Ned said nothing. He didn't like where this was going. The next day, the jousts began. Robert entered with a roar, smashing through lances, knocking knights from their horses like toys. The crowd loved him. His warhammer wasn't allowed, so he fought with brute strength and charm. But Rhaegar, he rode like a ghost. When it was his turn, silence fell. The Black Prince of Dragonstone, as some whispered now, rode into the arena like a dream of the old Targaryens. Silver hair, red cloak and armor polished like mirrors. He unhorsed Sir Arthur Dayne. He defeated Sir Barristan the Bold. He even bested the Mountain, and when it came time to crown the Queen of Love and Beauty, everyone assumed he'd give the crown of winter roses to his wife, Elia Martell. But Rhaegar looked into the crowd, and with slow, deliberate steps, he placed the crown on Lyanna Stark's lap. Gasps, whispers, stunned silence. Robert froze. Ned felt his chest tighten, and Lyanna, she didn't smile. She didn't frown either. She just looked at Rhaegar, and for a moment they were the only 2 people in the world. That moment cracked everything. Later that night, Robert burst into Ned's tent, drunk and raging. "He humiliated her!" "Humiliated me," he shouted. "That dragon bastard thinks he can just take what he wants?" Ned tried to calm him. It was just a gesture, a stupid one, nothing more. But Robert wasn't listening. His pride had been cut open in front of all the lords of Westeros. "He's not our brother anymore," Robert said bitterly. "He's just like the rest of them." Ned sat alone after Robert left. He didn't know what hurt more, seeing Robert this angry, or seeing Rhaegar take a path that led nowhere good. He went to Rhaegar's tent the next morning. The prince was tuning his harp. "You crossed a line," Ned said quietly. "I know," Rhaegar replied. "Why?" Rhaegar looked up. His eyes were tired. "Because the world is burning, Ned, and she's the only one who makes me feel alive in it." Ned didn't understand. Not yet. But in the shadows of Harrenhal, the winds of war had started to blow. And no one, not even the best of brothers, could stop what was coming. After the tourney at Harrenhal, nothing felt the same. The laughing was quieter. The letters stopped coming. The smiles turned to silence. Rhaegar vanished not long after. One day he was at court with his harp and scrolls. The next, gone. No guards, no fanfare, no message. Just gone. And so was Lyanna Stark. When news reached Winterfell, Lord Rickard nearly tore the castle stone by stone. He sent ravens to every corner of the realm. He demanded his daughter back. The realm whispered 2 stories. One said the prince had kidnapped her, stolen her from her betrothed. The other said she went willingly. But neither tale changed what came next. Robert Baratheon was no longer angry. He was hateful. "She was mine," he said through gritted teeth when he stormed into the Great Hall of Storm's End. "He stole her from me. He broke every oath, every law. "I'll kill him. I'll rip his silver head from his shoulders and feed it to crows." Ned had come south to visit him, hoping to calm things. But there was no calming Robert now. His fury was a fire that could not be smothered. "Robert," Ned said carefully, "we don't know what happened. Maybe they—" "Don't say it," Robert growled, eyes wild. "Don't you dare say she loved him. Don't make excuses for that dragon filth. She was your friend too," Ned reminded him. "She wouldn't want this." But Robert didn't listen. His knuckles were white around the handle of his warhammer. "If she's dead, I swear to the gods, I'll burn every Targaryen alive." Ned felt something crack in his chest. The boy from the Vale, the loud, laughing brother, was gone. In King's Landing, things were no better. Rhaegar had returned briefly, alone. He wore no crown, only black armor, and his face was pale. He said nothing of where he had been. The king, his father, refused to speak to him. Rumors said Aerys accused Rhaegar of plotting a coup. Others said the Mad King wanted to burn the entire Riverlands in revenge. And then came the madness. Brandon Stark rode to King's Landing, demanding his sister back. "Where is Lyanna?" he shouted before the Red Keep. But instead of answering, Aerys had him arrested and summoned Lord Rhaegar Stark to answer for his son's treason. Ned heard the news 2 weeks later. Brandon strangled by a noose, reaching for a sword just out of reach. Lord Rhaegar burned alive in his armor, as Aerys laughed below the Iron Throne. Robert smashed a table when he heard. Ned collapsed to his knees. Everything they knew was burning. Rhaegar sent no word. No letter, no defense. Robert fled to the Stormlands. The Mad King had ordered him seized. Lord Arryn, old but still sharp, refused to give up his wards. Instead, he raised his banners in open rebellion. The war of the usurper had begun. Ned, heartbroken and bitter, joined Robert without hesitation. Not because he wanted war, but because he couldn't forgive what was done to his father and brother. Still, deep inside, a part of him clung to the hope that this was not Rhaegar's fault, that the boy he had grown up with wouldn't have caused all this on purpose. Robert didn't share that doubt. He sharpened his warhammer each night, whispering Rhaegar's name like a curse. Far to the east, in a tower hidden in the Red Mountains of Dawn, Rhaegar held Lyanna close. She was not chained. She was not crying. She ran her fingers through his silver hair and kissed the scar on his chest. "You should have told them," she said softly. "I tried," Rhaegar whispered. "They didn't want truth. They wanted blood." "Robert will never stop," she said. "I know," he answered. "But neither will I." He placed a hand on her stomach. "He is the song of ice and fire," Rhaegar said, voice shaking. "He will unite them all. If we survive long enough to see it." Lyanna looked away, and for the first time she looked afraid. Back on the battlefield, Ned rode beside Robert, covered in mud and steel. The Vale had answered Lord Arryn's call. The North had come. So had the Riverlands. One by one, the kingdoms turned against the Targaryens. But every night, as Robert spoke of burning dragons and cutting down the king, Ned thought of Rhaegar, of the boy who played the harp, of the brother who stood in the snow beside him, swearing they'd always protect each other. Now, Ned had sworn another oath, one that would lead him straight into battle, straight toward the man he once called brother, straight toward a war that would change everything. The war was not glorious. It was fire and screams and ash. It was villages burned and boys barely grown buried in ditches. It was the kind of war that didn't end when the swords were sheathed, the kind that left a rot inside the survivors. Robert's rebellion spread like wildfire. The North, the Vale, the Riverlands, even the Reach began to turn against the Mad King. After Rickard and Brandon Stark were killed, there was no more room for hesitation. Lord Jon Arryn led the charge from the Vale. Robert fought like a beast, smashing through enemy lines with nothing but fury and a warhammer. And Ned, he fought in silence, always at Robert's side. But his thoughts were never still. Each time he crossed blades with a Targaryen loyalist, he wondered if Rhaegar truly believed he was right, if he knew what his choices had caused. The worst part? Rhaegar never came. He was not seen in the early battles. Whispers said he was gathering forces in the south. Others claimed he was in Dawn, protected by the Martells. Some said he was in hiding with the girl he had stolen, Lyanna Stark. Robert never believed she went willingly. Ned wasn't sure anymore, but either way, they both knew it had to end. Then came the letter. Rhaegar was marching north, with thousands of Targaryen loyalists, bannermen of Dawn and the Crownlands. The prince rode under the dragon banner, toward the Riverlands, toward Robert. The final battle would be fought at the Trident. The morning of the battle was quiet. No songs, no laughter, just the sound of men sharpening swords and praying to gods they barely remembered. Ned stood near the riverbank, staring at the rising mist. His armor was cold, his heart colder. Robert stood beside him, already bloodied from the earlier clashes. His warhammer was stained red. He wore no helmet. Only fury. He's coming, Robert muttered. I'll end it today. Ned looked at him. He was our brother once. Robert turned, his eyes full of hate. No, he stopped being our brother the day he put a crown on Lyanna and dragged her away. Ned didn't argue. What could he say? That Rhaegar loved her? That she might have loved him too? The truth had no place here. Only swords did. The horns blew. The Targaryen line charged. The river ran red within the hour. Steel clashed with steel. Shields shattered. Men screamed. It was chaos, rage, and madness. And in the center of it all, two titans finally found each other. Robert saw him first. Rhaegar was dressed in black armor, inlaid with rubies that shimmered like blood. His silver hair was tied back. He looked calm, not afraid, not angry, just ready. He drew his sword and pointed it at Robert. Robert charged with a roar that shook the battlefield. Their fight was not a dance. It was a storm. Warhammer against sword. Bone against metal. Two brothers, raised together, now trying to kill each other. Ned saw it from across the river. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Robert struck first, wild, furious, wide swings. Rhaegar moved with precision, blocking, dodging, striking when he could. You took everything from me, Robert roared. I tried to stop the madness. Rhaegar shouted back. I loved her. Their blades clashed again. Robert landed a blow that shattered part of Rhaegar's chest plate. Rubies scattered into the water like falling stars. Rhaegar staggered but didn't fall. You broke the realm, Robert hissed. No, Rhaegar whispered. I tried to save it. Then Robert drove the warhammer into Rhaegar's chest. The sound echoed like thunder. Rhaegar collapsed into the shallows. Blood pouring from his mouth, rubies floating around him like spilled dreams. Ned rushed to him. Shoving past soldiers, slipping in blood, he knelt beside Rhaegar, catching his final breath. I didn't want this, Rhaegar whispered. Ned held his hand. I know. She's safe, Rhaegar murmured. Promise me, Ned. Promise me you'll find her. Then he was gone. The water carried his blood downriver. Robert stood above them, breathing hard, warhammer shaking in his grip. He looked down at Ned. It's over. But Ned wasn't sure. Something had broken in him. Something that would never be fixed. Later that night they burned the dead. The sky turned red with fire and ash. The rubies were never found. Some say they're still at the bottom of the Trident, cursed. Robert was named the next king. He drank, laughed, and tried to forget. Ned went south. He followed the trail Rhaegar had left him, through the red mountains of Dawn, to a lonely tower where the winds never stopped crying. Inside, he found Lyanna, covered in blood, dying, holding a baby with dark hair and Rhaegar's eyes. Ned wept as she whispered her last words. Promise me, Ned. Don't let Robert find him. Promise me. He did. And in that moment Ned Stark became a liar. He named the child Jon, raised him as his own, hid the truth even from Robert. Even from the boy, because if Robert knew, the war would never be over. Winterfell looked smaller when Ned returned. The grey walls, the cold winds, the silent godswood. It should have brought him comfort. But it only reminded him of how much he'd lost. He brought a baby in his arms. A boy with black hair and violet eyes, and a lie already wrapped around his name. Jon Snow, he told everyone. His bastard. Born during the war. Shameful, yes, but better than the truth. Safer than the truth, because if Robert ever found out this child had Targaryen blood, he would kill him. That was no guess. Ned had seen the hate in Robert's eyes as he crushed Rhaegar's chest. He had heard him toast the death of the dragon line. No mercy, no forgiveness, not even for a baby. So Ned buried the truth so deep it hurt to breathe, even from Catelyn, especially from her. She looked at the baby with cold eyes and asked no questions. But her heart changed that day, not just toward the boy, but toward Ned too. The war was over, but peace. Peace was a battlefield of its own. In King's Landing, Robert Baratheon wore the crown, but it didn't fit. He held feasts instead of councils. Women warmed his bed more than politics. His warhammer, once drenched in the blood of kings, now gathered dust. He tried to smile, to laugh, to drink away the ghosts. But they didn't leave. Ned visited the capital once, not long after the coronation. The Red Keep was different. Colder, darker, full of whispers and poison. Robert greeted him like a brother, hugged him hard. But something had changed. Rhaegar's name was never spoken. When Ned saw baby Viserys and the last of the Targaryens, Daenerys, an infant girl, being hunted, he begged Robert for mercy. Mercy, Robert barked. For Dragonspawn? You saw what their kind brings, Ned? Fire, madness, and ruin. Ned pressed his lips shut. He didn't dare say what he was thinking, that Robert had become the very thing he once swore to destroy. Years passed. Jon grew up quiet, thoughtful, always watching. He asked about his mother sometimes, and each time Ned lied through his teeth. She was a maid I met in the south, he'd say. It was war. That's all, but lies wear heavy on the heart, and with each passing year, the weight crushed Ned more and more. Jon didn't fit with the others. Robb was the true-born heir, Catelyn's pride. Arya was wild but loved. Sansa was the perfect lady, and Jon was the shadow. He had Rhaegar's calm, his silence, his way of looking at the world as if he'd already seen too much. Ned feared the day someone else noticed. Meanwhile, Robert's rule began to rot. He named his old friends to the small council, men who cared more for gold than honor. Jon Arryn tried to guide him, but even he grew tired of the king's drunken rage and short temper. And worst of all, Robert married Cersei Lannister. That match, born from political desperation, would become the poison that shattered the kingdom from within. Robert drank more, cheated more, yelled more, and Cersei, proud and dangerous, played her own games in the shadows. Ned watched it all from the north, far away, pretending not to see, pretending the realm was still worth saving. But peace built on lies doesn't last, and Ned knew it. One night, as snow fell thick over Winterfell, Jon came to him. "Am I your son?" he asked. Ned froze. "Yes," he whispered, "but not your true-born son." "No," Jon nodded. His eyes were calm, but his fists were clenched. "Do you love me?" the boy asked. "With all my heart. Then why do I feel like I don't belong here?" Ned couldn't answer. He wanted to say, "Because you were born of fire and blood. Because your name could end a kingdom. Because loving you is the bravest lie I've ever told." But instead he just said, "You are a Stark, and that's all that matters." But it wasn't. Jon would grow older. The truth would call to him. The blood in his veins would wake, and when it did, the realm would tremble. Years later, Robert came to Winterfell with a royal procession. He asked Ned to be Hand of the King. "We were brothers once," Robert said over wine. "We swore we'd protect each other. Now I need you." Ned looked into the eyes of the man who once called Rhaegar brother too, who once laughed with him, trained with him, bled beside him. Now Rhaegar's bones lay in a grave, and his son stood upstairs alone in a cold room, with no idea who he truly was. Ned nodded. "I'll come," he said. But in his heart, he felt the storm coming. The war wasn't over. It had only begun. King's Landing had always felt like a trap. The air was thick, hot, and foul. The walls were too close, the shadows too long. When Eddard Stark arrived with his daughters, he felt as if he'd stepped into a nest of snakes, and every single one was smiling. Robert was no longer the boy he'd grown up with. He was swollen with drink, red-faced, bored of power. His eyes, once full of life and fire, now looked empty. He clapped Ned on the back like nothing had changed. "We're back, old friend," he said with a grin. "Just like the Vale, you and me against the world, but the world had changed, and so had they. Jon Arryn was dead. The man who raised them had died suddenly, quietly, too quietly. Whispers followed the corpse, poison, secrets, betrayal. And behind it all stood House Lannister, golden lions with golden lies. Robert didn't want to hear it. "You always see shadows, Ned," he said. "Let the past stay dead." But Ned couldn't, not when the crown was heavy with secrets. Not when Cersei's children didn't look like Baratheons. Not when the truth, like a long-buried corpse, was starting to claw its way to the surface. Ned remembered a different truth, the one buried in the crypts of Winterfell. A girl's dying breath. A promise made with blood on stone. A baby born with a dragon's eyes. Jon far away in the north, Jon Snow stood on the edge of manhood. The world called him a bastard, but the cold didn't bother him, nor did the whispers. What haunted him was the mirror, seeing something in his own face that didn't belong to Winterfell. He had dreams now, fire, wings, a sword made of light, a woman crying, a prince in silver armor. He tried to speak to Ned before he left. Tried to ask who his mother was, who he was, but all Ned said was, "The truth would hurt you more than lies ever could." So Jon stayed in the dark, but the truth does not stay buried forever. In King's Landing, Ned moved quietly. He began to pull at threads he wasn't supposed to touch. Jon Arryn had left behind a trail of breadcrumbs, names, bastards, secrets. Ned followed them all. He found the truth piece by piece. The Queen's children were not Robert's. They were Jaime Lannister's, incest, treason, a lie that put a false heir on the throne. When Ned told Robert, the king grew silent for the first time in years. Then he drank, then he went hunting and never came back alive. A boar ended the life of a king, but poison had already killed the man inside. Cersei moved fast, too fast. Before Ned could act, she had seized the throne for her son Joffrey, and the city turned red with betrayal. Ned was arrested. Treason, they called it, even though all he did was tell the truth. Even though he had once called her husband brother. Back in Winterfell, Jon Snow felt something was wrong. He could feel it in his chest, in his blood. The ravens came slowly. Ned imprisoned. Accused of treason. Sentenced to death. Jon stood alone in the Godswood. The snow swirling around him. "He's not a traitor," he said out loud. Though no one was there, he remembered the way Ned looked at him when he left for King's Landing. Like he wanted to tell him something he couldn't say. Like he was protecting something bigger than just honor. And Jon knew deep down that his father was keeping something from him. But it wasn't anger Jon felt. It was fear. Fear that everything was about to fall apart. In King's Landing, Ned Stark knelt before the sept of Baelor. His hands were bound. His eyes scanned the crowd, not for mercy but for Arya, for Sansa, for any last hope that this wasn't how it would end. He looked up at the boy on the throne. Joffrey, not Robert's son, not Rhaegar's blood. "Just another monster in golden silk, I confess," Ned said. He lied to save his daughters, only to protect a realm that didn't deserve it. But lies meant nothing to Joffrey. "Bring me his head," the boy king said with a smile. And just like that, Eddard Stark, honorable to the end, was gone. A man who died keeping a secret the realm wasn't ready to hear. In the far north, Jon fell to his knees in the snow when the raven came. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just felt something in him crack open. His father was dead, and Jon Snow was no one's son. But the truth, it was coming. He could feel it in the air, in the dreams. In the pull of something ancient and burning inside him, winter was coming. So was wahr. And the blood of the dragon was stirring. The north was colder than ever. But Jon Snow no longer felt the chill, not since the day the raven arrived with news of Ned Stark's death. The man he called father, beheaded in a city of liars, executed by a false king, betrayed by the very realm he had bled to protect. Jon had not spoken much since. He trained harder, fought longer, stood watch in the darkest hours without complaint. But inside him something had changed. The truth still hid behind Ned's silence, but Jon could feel it now. The way Catelyn never looked at him. The way Ned always paused before answering a simple question about his mother. The way the blood in his veins felt different, as if it was waiting to be known. Then came Sam. Quiet, kind Sam. A friend who saw the world through truths and books, not swords. One night Sam found an old record in the Night's Watch library. Buried under dust, forgotten, a secret marriage, Sam whispered. Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, it's in here. It was real. Jon froze. The name struck him like a sword. He didn't understand at first why those two names mattered. Why Sam looked at him like he was seeing a ghost. Then Sam said the words, Jon, you're not a Snow. You're not Ned's bastard. You're Aegon Targaryen, the son of Rhaegar, the last dragon. Jon felt the world collapse under him. The truth wasn't freedom. It was a cage of fire. In Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen stared into the sea. The world knew her as the last of the dragon blood, the breaker of chains, the girl who survived fire. But now the North whispered of a boy, a bastard, a brother. When Jon Snow arrived, Daenerys expected a stubborn northerner. What she found was a man torn between blood and honor, a man who spoke little, but with truth in his voice. A man who fought the cold like it was personal, and when they stood beside each other, staring into fire, the flames seemed to know them both. Two Targaryens, two heirs, two orphans of war, but fate is never kind to dragon-blooded children. In King's Landing, the realm burned with quiet war. Cersei wore the crown, but fear ruled behind her smile. She saw ghosts in every shadow, Robert in the wine, Ned in the corridors, and now Rhaegar in the face of Jon Snow. She had fought too long, killed too many to lose it all now. When word spread that Rhaegar's son lived and had bent no knee to her, she began to sharpen her knives once more. Jon didn't want the crown. He said it 100 times. I never asked for this. I never wanted thrones or banners. I only wanted to protect the realm. But names have power, and his name, Aegon Targaryen, echoed louder than truth. Some wanted him to rule, some wanted him dead, and Daenerys. She stood at the edge of all she had dreamed of. She had crossed seas, freed slaves, conquered cities, all to reclaim her family's throne. But now she wasn't the last, and that made her dangerous. Jon saw it in her eyes, a fire too strong to hold back. I don't want it, Jon told her. But it's yours by right, she said. I only want peace. There is no peace without fire, she whispered, and Jon understood. She would burn for the throne, just like Aerys, just like Rhaegar feared. So he made the hardest choice of his life. They stood in the throne room of the Red Keep. Daenerys touched the Iron Throne. She smiled like a child finally reaching a dream. Jon stepped behind her. I'm sorry, he said. She turned, confused.
For what?
For what comes after. Then he drove the dagger through her heart. She gasped, not with pain, but with recognition, as if she had seen it coming all along. She fell in his arms, blood dripping on the floor of kings and monsters. The last dragon had died by another dragon's hand. Later, Jon stood alone as the city settled into ashes, the Iron Throne melted by dragon fire, the houses of men broken. The North, scarred forever. Bran became king. Tyrion, his hand. Sansa ruled the North as its own kingdom. Jon? He was sent back to the Wall, the boy who never truly belonged. A bastard in name, a prince in blood, now just a man with ghosts too loud to silence. He left one last note for Arya before riding north. I wasn't born to rule. I was born to end what they began. Rhaegar, Robert, Ned, 3 brothers, raised together. Torn apart. I was the last of them, even if I wasn't truly theirs. But I loved them all, and I carry all 3 inside me. He vanished beyond the Wall, into the White, where no thrones exist, where names don't matter, only peace and silence.